you know much about the Silver City Bar?
Well, the Silver City Bar was a bar for colored people, and the guy that ran that's name was Nick Yamer, and it wasn't restricted to colored people, but there wasn't a great number of white people went down there. But Butter and the Elks Quartet, as we call them, they travel in that circle because there was Silver City Bar had some pretty good black musicians in there too.
So they go down there and play the same with those guys.
They played for a living, but they played for fun too. If there wasn't a living involved or it wasn't someplace to be a job, they still went and played and enjoyed themselves. Because like I say, that they were people that had to be around people. And I don't remember, like I say, when Butter would get mad at Bill or this Moose Burt, he'd get a little bit mad, but I can't remember Butter that he wasn't smiling all the time. Of course, his another nickname he had was Lefty. It was up in the, and this is back to this problem with making a living in a profession. When Butter was practicing dentistry, or at that time it was John Kane, the dentist. Then right down the hall, Duke Schroeder was a dentist, and Duke was the one that I think Chris and Butter Lefty. I'm not sure. Duke was he had worked for some railroad down in Colorado before he even went into dental school. He was more or less older than the average dental graduate when he graduated. And he had the office down the hall from where Butter and John Kane were. And just from my recollection, there wasn't like today you go in a dentist's office and it's not a production line. There's somebody there constantly. The dentist never stops. These guys probably worked half the time because there wasn't any, there was not that influx of patients. And I think that's one of the reasons why Butter, of course, and one of the other reasons was it was a confining profession where you just saw what came in the door. You didn't, and that was entirely foreign to Butter's nature. He was quite a football player, as you probably know. Played for the university. And that gets back to Duke Schroeder. Duke Schroeder coached Butter in high school. The extent of all that, I don't know, but that's how they were pretty close. And there were some excellent football players at that time that Butter played with. Butter was not a big man, but he was pretty capable. He liked to fight. I mean, he didn't look for a fight, but the fight never got away if he had a chance of getting a hold of it. And I think he held his own pretty good because he was left-handed. And I can remember when I was about 6 or 7 years old, the Elks had a boxing class for members' sons, so they got me into this boxing class. And most of the kids in the class were older than I was. There's very few 6 or 7 year olds in the thing, 2 of us I think. Anyway, the instructor's name was Sullivan. I don't know what his first name was, but he was a friend of Butter's. And at that time, well, all his life, Butter was a great handball player. And then the Elks would put on these mixers. And I can remember they put on this mixer at the Elks, and I was on the card to fight Gene Daly. I don't know whether you were acquainted with Gene Daly. Was county commissioner here for a while, and Gene Daly was a left-hander. And I can always remember Butter telling me, now, watch this guy. He says, he's a lefty. He says, "You're gonna learn something." And I never figured it out, but I did learn something. And I finally, later on, figured out that that's why Butter was successful whenever he got into a battle, was he was a lefty, and these guys weren't acquainted with too many left-handed fighters. But he enjoyed it, and he won his share. And he had black eyes that he told me he didn't get. He had a fight for, nobody gave them to him. I can remember I was only involved in one real action that he was in. I wasn't involved, I was a spectator, but I was probably, this is about just before I went back to Annapolis, I think. And then he was playing in the Aero Club in the Sump then. And there was a carnival in town. And anyway, this guy came in and I was there at the time, and I don't know who the guy was, but he asked Butter, he says, "Have you seen something like, and apparently this carnival had a tough guy with it. He was uptown terrorizing everything. But he didn't come in where Butter was playing. So Butter, well, where's the guy?" And they talked and talked, and it was about time to shut the place down. So the guy was up in where the club, what is the Club 13 is now, well, that was Red Riley's joint. Red Riley and his brother Blackie Riley, they ran that. This wasn't during Prohibition. Everything was legal then. But the guy was up in Red Riley's joint terrorizing everybody. So Pelletier was with Butter a lot when the rest of these guys weren't. He'd be there singing and raising hell and having fun. Anyway, they closed the music down at the Aero Club and took off for Red Riley's, and I followed right along with them. Well, they get in there, and this guy, I don't know what he was a big guy, so Butter took right after him, and the guy knocked Butter down. He's down beating on Butter, and Pelletier took a kick at the guy and kicked Butter in the head. And anyway, they got up, they went round and round. It was quite a battle for a while. And Butter finally got some good licks in on the guy, hammered him pretty good. Well, I think it's still there, but there was a back door to the place out into the alley between the First National Bank there. Well, Butter run the guy out the back door, and this is when the real trouble started. When the guy went out the door, there was a car coming down the alley and it hit the guy. Well, it didn't kill him or hurt him real bad, but it put him out of commission. And to this day, I wonder if that guy figured that Butter hit him or he didn't know whether the car hit him or not, But it was, my mother always trusted me with Butter. We were over town and ran into him, and he loved kids, well, come on, leave him come with me, Well, she might not see me till 2 o'clock the next morning, even when I was 7 or 8 years old, he'd take me with him and we'd travel around. But she never worried her too much. Bill would get his snoot full, and he'd come up to the house, and Bill was ready to fight anybody. Danny probably can tell you more about Bill than I can. But he'd come up there, and whether he'd be trying to referee something. He was always afraid to go home because May'd throw him out. But he'd come up there, and it was always ugly. Not ugly, but it wasn't sweet. But Butter'd come up there, and not like Bill. He never was belligerent or ready to looking for trouble. but Bill was always, when he'd get going, he was just the opposite. And Butter, you know, playing football like he did, he was interested in anybody else that played football. I can remember Danny Hanley was quite a football player for Central after Butter's time. Danny Hanley went back to Notre Dame and played a year, but I think Danny Hanley had a drinking problem and things were different then. But I remember one day Butter got through playing and he and Danny Hanley were walking over Park Street. Butter and Ethel were living in the 1100 block of Park Street, just up from Hammett, in a little duplex there. We run into Bill Doble. Doble was playing football for Butte High at the time. Doble was a pretty good football player, so they decided they'd take Doble home and show him how to punt a football. So they took him in the flat, and Doble did his punting right in the front room. He kicked the ceiling right out of the front